proudly behind you and in front of the flag.
I have never seen you wear a hat.
You've never seen me walk in the rain.
Oh, there you go.
May redevelopment land bank hat.
All right, I think we're good to go, so good morning, everyone.
Good morning. It's pretty light schedule for us today. I know we've had presentation after presentation after presentation in the last 4 weeks and Big Finance Friday. We're doing some wrap up from the council meeting with the band bond. I think we got one answer there, and really going to prep. I know we're all working on trying to make those council meetings shorter. I look back on the meeting and is that one question on capitalized interest that was like 30 minutes, a single question that we went down. So
That's what happens.
So how do we avoid those in the future? How do we get a little better prepped? There's always going to be that time when we don't have a perfect answer to a question like that. So, but I really want to, there's got to be ways that we can avoid that in the future, not just for the council, but for staff prepping ahead of time to have a solid answer there. Or maybe not. Steve, you seem to disagree.
Well, my thing, because you know my thing, I think we should have 2 meetings a month, but that doesn't pass with everybody's feeling. I think we should have the first Monday and the third, but I think it's a time where we all can learn from the synergies in the room.
Yeah.
I don't want to limit too much of that. I get everyone would like to get out early, or not run till 10 o'clock, but I don't want to cut things so tight and short that we don't all learn from it.
Yeah, and I agree with that in a lot of ways too, because it's honestly my only time to talk to all 7 of you as a group, and to I like the back and forth, and so I think there's some areas where we can. The 2 meetings, like I said, I promised I'm going to do everything in my damnedest, and if we come back next organizational meeting where you'll be here, you'll be able to say, I told you so, Steve, and maybe we'll.
I'm not saying to change it, I'm just saying that it's something that I think could flow much easier and smoother once you get into the rhythm, and then you cancel the meeting that's on a holiday, and you have one meeting that month, and I think there'd be less special meetings, but the last thing I want to do is get out at 9 o'clock with questions as opposed to get out at 10 o'clock with answers.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know Tammy, we
I just get a little grumpy
I
after
know.
9 o'clock.
We need to bring her snacks. She and Michelle don't eat beforehand, so.
Yeah, we so often lived in like the structures of our, we could figure out how to break it, where we could, it could be a dinner or something. I don't know. Or we could, if we go to 2, the big thing is like, I think there'd have to be some massive changes to how we, because the big problem with 2, I said, one is, we'll be in just a constant stress mode for public hearings, newspaper reports, meeting arrangements. You're going to double the work on all of that. It's already a big enough, just with the holiday next week, staff have to have, anything for public hearings early next week. We just finished a council week, so next week's council is getting locked in. The week after that, I need all the memos in. I have to break off a ton of time to kind of get those done. Bring in Tammy and Michelle and the chair to kind of get locked into that. So you do every 2 weeks, but I'm not saying oppose, we'd have to, I feel like, rearrange the structure and how we notify, how we do, and so I don't know. This space does seem to be, how can we make it more efficient?
There's not support for 2 meetings per month, so I think that's off the table, because I've brought it up twice and there isn't any support for that, and I'm not saying revisit that, I'm just saying that I'd rather be here till 10 o'clock and have answers than 9 o'clock and have another meeting about it.
Yeah. I wouldn't say there's no support. I know Tammy was somewhat supportive originally of the.
No, actually, I'm not. No, I don't disagree. I think I had said that at one time, that I would be in support of 2 meetings a month. And
Yeah.
again, it's not that I want another meeting. I have plenty of meetings, but again, it's just, it seems like we're going so late. How many people are actually watching it after 8 o'clock, after we've been here? That's my other concern, is that people are probably like, oh, that's a little boring, or,
Yeah.
so.
As the night goes on, the decisions get quicker, and I'm not sure they're as well thought out.
It could be that too. on looking ahead towards the next council meeting, one of the things that we've got the vac truck and the loader coming in. I know Mike's getting all the pieces there for public hearings, et cetera. The vac truck is was in the budget cycle for this year, so we should be all set there. The loader was not, although it's a pretty critical thing I think we need to move forward with, but there is the highway capital equipment reserve account. I feel like we're now going to start using this reserve funding, but it seems like, Tammy, that might be an appropriate place to do the year one and then tag that for a refund, like for refunding in the next budget cycle. And
I thought the loader was in the budget.
Remember talking about it a little.
no, I'm pretty sure,
Okay.
because I just talked to Mike about that. But let me quadruple check, because I thought we thought about it for ARPA, we thought about it for a few other things, and we pulled it off. But that's what I was reviewing. So if we have to move forward on that, I think it would have to come from the reserve, but I'll get you final answers on that.
So why didn't that vac truck and the loader go into the band?
Well, the vac truck was in the budget.
No, but that big band package that you just brought to us, instead of finding another, you could have just put that in the band/bond, just bond it all together.
Yeah, I thought because of the budget, that it's paid for out of the budget, we wouldn't pay for it with another financings. We've already paid it, we've already put it into this year's taxes. So
Oh,
it
then
would-
why are we asking to finance it then?
I think that the idea was it would be like coming out of every year's budget cycle for just like kind of like the lease payments we do on the police cruisers. At least in the budget season, that's what we talked about.
Yeah, the total wasn't budgeted for, and I'm pretty sure that HVAC and the plow were in ARPA funding.
Yeah, that we do that the first payment would be,
Yeah.
we talked about this in the first budget cycle, about that, the first payment would be, void for the year, but we still had to put it in the budget even though it wasn't even though we weren't going to pay for a year. I think there was conversations like that you can't just go out to it without actually securing the funding, so that's how we put it.
Yeah.
My recollection, and I may have it wrong, was there was some fuzzy math financing going on where he wouldn't make a payment for a year or some darn thing. There was some fuzzy math going on there. And I'll tell you, just because something's in the budget doesn't mean we have to do it.
That's true.
Doesn't mean it has to be done. There's a lot of pushback on this vac truck. Everywhere I go, I get pushback constantly. What are they doing?
I have a question on that. Is that the one that was going to pay for itself? There was one major investment by two or three of the different departments, and it was going to pay for itself because we're paying for those services now. And is that the truck?
Yeah, this is
So
in
you're
that category.
remembering fuzzy math. I remember it was going to reduce other expenses and.
This is the one you wanted to see if Mike could go to other cities and towns and vac truck for them a little bit.
That's right.
And this one, pay for itself, but definitely defrayed by, tens of thousands of dollars in contractor fees for vac trucking or for, blowing out some of these culverts and pipes. And I went to one of the water main digs a couple times, and they wheel up what looks like a little toy squirt gun as their current way to it's something you'd buy. It looked like a homeowner piece for massive. So the vac truck, not only that, it's been on bond and before, and the bond money's been reallocated to other things. So the vac truck has actually been put on things, I think since like 2018, 2019 as something for the city. But they go, which is why I know to your point, Steve, it doesn't have to, but was decision of council to keep that in during the budget cycle. And we keep paying other monies for it to go. And it's, in addition to saving that money on what's done, it also gives us like the operational capability to, hey, there's a culvert that's, or it's blocked up, or there's something that needs to be, and we're not blowing out our pipes nearly as much as we should. So it's gonna allow us to, it's a bigger customer service increase as well, because,
That was never on bond.
Yes, it was, Mark.
In 18 or 19,
Before I left here, it was.
we turned it down.
You said that-
So, Mark,
We'll go back and.
if you want
look
to
at
talk,
it.
please talk into the microphone, and
Who's
then,
with it?
okay, well then, please be quiet. I wanted to say that of the three, of the vac truck, 2/3 of the cost is also coming out of enterprise accounts, correct?
That's-
Correct. Yeah.
So, I mean, we've talked about this as a council, we voted to approve it, and as I understand it, it's in the budget for this year, so I don't understand why we would then ban and bond it if it's already in the budget.
To pay for it. I think it was,
I think,
The-
don't we have the money to pay?
do we have the money to pay for it?
Yeah, it's in the, it's in
Oh,
the,
then
it's in
why,
the.
I still don't understand.
Sorry, it's the
Why
it's the loader that didn't make it in. This is what so the vac truck's in the budget. We taxed for it as part of this year's, commitment. So we're gonna properly public hearing it, as we talked about last time around, which is why it was tabled, for last meeting. And then the loader is the one that was, I don't think is actually allocated in the budget. So that's, is that correct?
Yeah, it's just the plow truck that's allocated in the budget and the HVAC truck.
The HVAC truck and the plow truck, so let me dial in the numbers on this, get you actually paper in front of you on kind of how this works.
Yeah, because usually if you put it in the budget, it's for the full amount, and you wouldn't need to finance it. That's what I'm having an issue with. On that order, it was asking to finance it through First National Bank, and I'm like, why are we financing it if we've already budgeted for it and have the money for it?
Well, there was two ways we were gonna do it. One was like NLC, I could be getting that name wrong, but I think in the first, when Mike was talking about it and brought it here, they talked about the equivalent of enterprise leasing it, like this was gonna be, it's gonna be defrayed for a year, this would be our first payment. And so we basically put into the budget the first year payment, even though it wouldn't hit until next year. But we needed to get additional quotes, and I think there was a request for like local bank options to be put forward, which is why we got the First National piece on it too.
I'll have to take a
The whole amount, as I recall, was not put in this year's budget because there was some fuzzy math financing from the company you just said, not local banks.
NLC,
But when
yeah.
it was presented originally,
Yeah, we won't
Every
make the first
department.
payment until next year.
every department, the three departments was all gonna share in the cost annually, because there was a finance option in there, as I recall. Does that line up with?
I recall that, yeah, each a third, and Public Works, or however, it's highway, wastewater, drinking water, right? That would be, I think, something along those lines.
Water, sewer, and highway.
Yeah, exactly. And then, they wouldn't, the first payment wouldn't be due until fall of 2025.
Yeah, something like
Yeah.
that. It was fuzzy
So we
math.
still have to, I don't know if it's fuzzy, it just means they're not
Yeah, it
asking
wouldn't-
us to pay till 2025.
So what are we, how is it relevant to today's meeting? We voted to do it. Is it because it's moving forward now?
It's been tabled twice now, so I'm gonna I want to start using these meetings, especially maybe the next one we have, to probably have Mike
Right.
and finance and team come in, just to make sure we're dialed in. Obviously, it's gonna be public hearing, so that
Yeah,
this
instead of
next.
trying to go by memory, let's go by
look.
what
Yeah,
the-
that's why I was like, I wish we had some
Yeah.
papers in front of us.
Yeah,
to
so I'm
see.
sorry, I
Yeah.
probably should have.
That's okay, no.
Happy
We
to,
just-
happy to move it forward, but we need, like, instead of like what I remember from 6 months ago.
Right, and I think that's
Right.
not, obviously, we're not gonna be here next Friday, but the following Friday, I think we might do a pre on that piece. We tabled it twice, wanna make sure we
Right.
get it out, and especially having seen it in other bonds and discussion and, the importance of it, let's actually put it there, but making sure that's dialed in. The other thing I'm thinking about for the next, is the ARPA finalization. And I'm sort of prepping two scenarios, which is, there's some things that have come in under budget in, like the security door, is 8,000 under budget. Some other pieces were under budget. We have about $10,000 in accumulated interest that, are there. So but we don't want to give any money back to the feds, so.
I'm laughing because she's turning the heat off. I've never seen that before.
When Tammy's hot, then everyone.
She's got 6 sweaters
There you
on,
go.
so, yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but I'm chuckling. I've never seen that before.
Sorry, I just totally lost my train of thought.
ARPA
ARPA
funding.
funding.
ARPA funding, thank you. I started thinking about chargers, which is my next thing, and brain went off. So I want to prep two options. Do I need a public hearing? I think I'm just going to public hearing that on discussion of ARPA funding, reallocation to certain amounts. So, like if the council, if I said, we want to, reallocate this ARPA funding to this road, or we want to reallocate the ARPA funding to, to additional construction work of X category in the fire department area, where, there's some remodel work after the lead remediation demo that might make sense down there while everything's torn out. Or if we want to reallocate it to Healthy Acadia, like that's the other piece I'm prepping for this next piece, is what we want to do with that. But I'm wondering, for council, and maybe this is not next Friday, but the following Friday, how I tee that up so we're not in a, we have to have a public hearing and you need to have an emergency meeting to clear the decks, so we don't have to give it, tens of thousands of dollars back to the feds, so.
I think you need a public hearing, really. I mean, personally,
What would the reason to have a public hearing be?
usually it's for financing.
For financing.
Or business licenses, that sort of thing. I mean, our meeting's public anyways. We allow the public to speak on
Yeah.
behalf of any item on the agenda, so I
Yeah.
don't think it needs an actual public hearing to advertise it that way.
Okay.
So, that's my personal
I
opinion.
agree. I mean, technically, unless the charter says that this type of decision needs to be a public hearing or state statute, and this is not a state statute issue, so it's, unless the charter says a decision by the council on allocation of funding
Yep.
that we already have, requires a public hearing, it's not necessary.
Okay.
And then to that point, I think the way I would tee it up, Charlie, is I think ultimately when we get it to the council in December, we want to have, the important thing is whatever we do, it is appropriate, it's, I can't remember the term, but we have to have it we were talking about the other week, we can't just say, oh, we're gonna do this. We have to take an affirmative step to make sure, make it clear that this is where that funding's going, if it doesn't leave our coffers by December 31st. Otherwise, they could still claw it back.
Right. We need I think Ashley's got what's the requirement?
So we have to have an invoice or a purchase order from wherever we're acquiring, whatever we're buying.
Yeah.
Let's say if we're buying the vac truck, we have to have an invoice or a purchase order or some sort of contract from that supplier that we will be purchasing that for a set amount. And then we go on the website, the portal that they've supplied. We allocate it in there that we are going to spend those funds by, I think it's 2026 is when they have to be spent.
Yeah.
So all funds will be spent by that date, and we just have to make sure that the state knows that we've allocated them out, either with an invoice, a purchase order, or some sort of contract.
Yeah, so perfect. And then, so for the meeting in December, it'd be, here are your options,
Yep.
A, B, C, or whatever, council, what do you want to do?
And when we're looking at those options, I thought when we allocated funds, we had a second-tier wish list if there was money available. So again, we've already done the thinking.
Yep.
Let's bring that back up to the top and see if it's still relevant and how it fits in with new information we've got.
That's exactly and we did a lot of additional infrastructure planning on kind of every wish list from departments that's there as well. I mean, there's things like the cherry picker that I've seen rent. We've had 2 different ones rented for lifts and cherry pickers just in the last couple weeks. So they had rented one for a few days to do some things. They rented another one. That was another one that's pretty close in the list of highway. But I'll bring those as here are the other ones. I might have a staff recommendation. But there was a fair amount in the cycle. So
Cherry pickery, is that like a man lift?
yeah, like a man lift. Yeah.
So maybe the agenda item would be discussion and action on final allocation of ARPA funds or something like that. Yeah.
Potential action on final. I love that.
You never used one of those big cherries, Steve?
No, I haven't.
Oh, I used to use those all the time in my campaign days, because you'd be in these huge arenas and you'd have to hang banners. And sometimes it required unions that were only allowed to do that, and sometimes I'd just be able to rent it myself and
Yay.
go up there and
I've
hang a
just
banner.
never heard it called a cherry picker.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's what I know it as.
I always thought that was a truck.
Well, there's two kinds. So there's there's a few kinds. There's
A doohickey.
there's like your lift that just, anchors down and then goes up as like a big kind of cage.
Yeah, yeah.
Those things are easier but then there's the one that has like the little bucket, right?
Yeah.
That's the one I think it was the cherry picker,
Yeah.
but you can kind of zip over.
Well,
So,
now we've had our training on
Cherry
the
pickers.
appropriate
I think we're
cherry
all ready,
picking
we're
equipment.
all licensed to go.
That's right.
The public hearing memo is actually another thing that, on that note, I've noticed that as another stream of, we've been tripped up on public hearings a few times. And I've tried to, I looked for, hey, what's the outlines of all the public hearings? It seems as though it's scattered through all of the ordinances, that this requires a public hearing, this doesn't. So working with Sue and Ebony to just, hyper search every single ordinance for public hearing, and then let's, pull it all out to have a master memo on that, so that department heads and us can be a little less reliant on Michelle and Tammy, who we're excited for through next, I don't know, you probably know how many days are left.
I
Tammy.
don't right now.
But, so that we can kind of institutionalize that process of just, this is what's required, this is not, and that can save everybody time.
Could I just comment on that a second? What is the drawback of making everything a public hearing?
I thought I had the exact same conversation. I was just.
Cost, because it costs so much money to put a public hearing in the newspaper, and your public hearing is your agenda, which we put in the public hearing section of the
But it
newspaper.
seems that, in my experience here, it seems that that has cost a few tablings and a few cancellations and a few kicks down the road, and that's costly too. Maybe you don't see an invoice for that, but
I think
I'm just wondering.
I think that's Charlie's point. We need to get better at the process so that it isn't causing delays without the added cost of public notices, and I'm sure the staff time just to prepare.
Yeah, and I think
It's not just us sitting here on whether or not Michelle bangs the gavel.
And I don't know if you got to get Breaking Robert's Rules, but it's kind of this.
Twice now I forgot to bring it back to you. I have it to return to you after.
But, sometimes these structures are, they're designed for very important purposes, right? For making sure that as council in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, when newspapers were your primary, that if you're going to spend any money like that, you needed to make sure that you put it somewhere so people knew about it. It couldn't happen in the dead of night. Now with social media and Facebook and online and websites, the primary way people are finding out that these meetings are happening, they're all televised, is through that channel. But we still have this kind of legacy piece, which actually creates operational issues for us and how far out we actually have to get it in the paper. So we kind of play by the rules of 60 years ago, and we can see there are a few people that really want to make sure they see it there because it's the rule. But is it serving its purpose? Is it actually costing us a ton of money for it? Now, I think we can clean things up operationally where, we can kind of get both, which is it's posted appropriately according to the rules, and we're not wasting because we kicked it out another month and that's happened before. The plow trucks, a used one that we were looking for and trying to get it in the mix, and the operations to get it there because I can't spend anything more than $15,000 to get it on and by the time we were coming to council for a plow truck, it was gone. Somebody else grabbed the truck because if it takes, a month to secure the funding and have it there, and somebody comes with cash and says, I want this, it's like, well, I'm not waiting for the city of Ellsworth to, finalize their process. So, in the future, I could see, is there a better way for some of these equipment type purchases, which oftentimes.
Yeah, just to that point, I think exactly to your point, the reason we have public hearings, are somewhat antiquated for some things. The ultimate goal is that the public has notice of what we're doing, and then they can come in for certain things that public input is required, that they're allowed to provide input.
Right.
That's the whole purpose of a public hearing. So the default is, for our actions and, agenda items, it's not a public hearing, and technically the public does not have a right to comment on it. However, we choose through our rules of order to say we'll accept, public comments, on agenda items. You can speak to, so technically you don't have to allow any public comment on anything other than a public hearing under Maine law. So the question then becomes, whatever we've in our charter or our ordinance have designated, hey, this needs to be a public hearing, this needs to be a public hearing. One, we should know that for the reasons you're saying, is we need to know what, but two, I think it gives us the opportunity to reflect, like, does this need to be a public hearing? Do we want to amend this? Because again, we're still allowing public input, but it doesn't, we're still allowing the public to come speak on, hey, I don't like this vac truck, I want, you to spend the money on this. And, if it's an agenda item, our rules say you get 3 minutes to speak on it.
Right.
So, but then if we don't have all the cost and clunkiness of having to notice a public hearing for something that we technically don't have to do, but we're still providing the process that public hearing affords, I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I've actually just thinking narratively of the organization. Like Tammy Michelle kind of like wrote the book on City Hall, like the policies and procedures, every little piece down, and then they kind of got put on shelves for 4 or 5 years, and we're kind of pulling the books back out now. But it also, I think, is a time to reanalyze it. I mean, I'm sure if you're of the book, we're kind of creating this new book on what works best for the times that we're in now.
Well, that was all everything's on Zoom, right? This was.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now, because we have this virtual, anyone can access our meetings and watch them and participate. It may be time to do it a little bit.
Yeah.
In the public hearing one, is that a state law that we have to do these for financing, or is it internal?
I believe so.
And my other question would be, to your point, Steve, like, could we just have a general rule that anything that involves financing or like spending money from the city will be open to public comment during council meetings, and the agenda is a notification that like money would be spent?
But we can do that without it having to be a public hearing as Maine law views it. We can still say, in our rules of order, we can say all agenda items regarding the allocation of spending.
Right.
Funds, public is allowed 3 minutes of comment.
And my sense is that's our process now. We have the citizen comments portion for things not on the agenda, and when it's used appropriately, that's a great way to hear from the community in a formal way. And then Michelle does say, are there any comments on this before we move forward? So
Yeah.
we frame it that way, that you're describing now.
But for certain things, when you have to have a public hearing,
Right.
and it has to go through notice. And
It's like a separate column.
I totally, I understand that. I thought you were saying for other things, just we allow the public comment.
Yeah.
And if we go for the need for a public hearing, as you had suggested, when the city's spending any money, I would say is that over the $15,000 threshold you already have authority for?
Yeah, if it's under 15,000 and obviously budgeted, there is actually discretion for even
Yeah.
unbudgeted items for me, but as you all know, I like to come back. Actually, we had a discussion with the deputy city manager candidate from a bigger city that mentioned, wow, I saw that 15,000, like, you need to get that raised. And this, and I said, I was like, to be honest, it's not a hindrance. I feel like actually sometimes it helps to pull things down if it's a budgeted item, and we're like, well, if you can get under 15,000, we can, it might even help a bit. And if it's $500, I like to keep telling
Yeah.
you all about these things.
Absolutely.
We talked about the, some of the survey work for the courthouse and other things. I don't like to do that in the dead of night. I know the sign was another piece of that, which was previously funded by the city, but wasn't necessarily approved by council. Now it's the city manager had authority to do that. You're allowed to do that, but I also feel like it's incumbent to inform you. I came to a finance committee meeting. That was a decision made before I came here, but really, if it's any spending that's not totally routine and emergency based, to bring it forward. So I actually like that threshold. It's some of the bigger purchases though that if it's budgeted, if it's if we're doing the procurement policy, we're getting the 3 quotes and we need to purchase it, that extra time, that's when, and this isn't to solve this month or this meeting, but I feel like that's where we've lost some of just, we need to, there could be some operational efficiencies there. And maybe to your point, Patrick, we look at that too. Once I get the memo together on everything that requires a public hearing, it's, is this in line with state law? Is there can we not have these, and we're spending money on all those public hearing notices too. Like, can we just have the agenda published with a notification that like any item that involves funding from the state or funding from the city and or leasing like is considered a public hearing and will be open to citizen comment? Like, would that satisfy the, so we can get out of this this double work we do as a staff? And it is, people are nervous about it, so.
I just want to say one more thing about that. There's got to be some sort of a hybrid there that doesn't run the cost bill with individual items.
Yeah.
And I guess a rough example of that is, you've got staff trying to figure out, do we need to do this, do we not? An example of that is Federal Express sends everything to Tennessee. Even if I send something to City Hall and drop it in the bucket, it goes to Tennessee, and it comes back to Ellsworth. And that doesn't make sense for that transaction, but it makes sense for their entire business model to make that happen. And so my question to that is there the whole agenda, could all of it be announced as a public hearing without being, is there some product that works every time, even if it's a little bit redundant here, but you don't have staff looking and pawing and digging to see what needs to be done and what doesn't need to be done? I would think there's got to be a hybrid product that would
I think that's what
work.
we're trying to work through.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's exactly what
Yeah.
you're describing, I think is what I'm envisioning, is, making sure the public is aware of what we're doing, allowing public comment on those items, but not having to go through the cost and exercise of noticing something as a public hearing unless we're absolutely required to do so. Because in the end, we're getting to the same place as informing the public, allowing for process, and then we make a decision. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
And I'm meeting with, I don't have too much time left here this morning, but I am gonna go meet with Sue. She had emailed me and asked me to kind of give her, like, lowdown on what needs public hearings.
Great,
So,
great.
okay.
I think that's another, and that's what I've been thinking, we kind of got to build a new book together that is right size for the current organization, as opposed to kind of having lived in this, weren't following it according to the letter, or spearhead the law in a lot of ways. But also we're trying to get back to the book, and what makes sense, what doesn't. So it's going to be tough, but then, a few years from now, Tammy and Michelle will be gone, and we'll have a great process, and we won't be having to call them during meetings.
They'll be
Phone a
watching
friend.
on their Facebook, laughing
It's like,
on in their.
no,
The special
I always
ordinance.
say that, but I really do enjoy being on council.
Oh, good.
It's very time consuming.
Yeah, I know. The time consuming, I don't know. I've been thinking about that. How do we get more longevity in council? And there's been a lot of, glad to have Steve back for a second term, but not just have it, but anyways, far afield now. The Chargers, emailed Nancy and Ashley and I are working on trying to just get, what's the bill at Franklin Street? That's where I really want to, I feel like that can give us an idea of what kind of revenue expectations we can get out of these other chargers. And then also make a decision on, do we keep those other ones around, or we just go to an exclusively pay for model? And in the meantime, because this is a spring install for these, we're going to look into getting the signs up and a system so that people can, without too much enforcement, donate to the system, and to see if that can at least cover costs. Because if it can cover costs over there, or get pretty close to it, having additional EV infrastructure, I wouldn't want to just pull it out. But, I'm guessing it's going to be tens of thousands for, it's essentially, those are two equivalent of 3 or 4 dryers going for 10 hours a day. So that's.
Really, you think the cost is that high? I'll be interested to see what the costs are.
I think it'll be at least 10 grand.
I had my head down this morning because of the rain, so didn't notice, but usually when I'm walking, there's at least one car, if not two.
Yeah, the equivalent of there's one, and there's an EV Hummer out there, that's an enormous battery.
Yeah, that thing's just,
Yeah.
Let alone it's just an irony existing.
It
but,
goes 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds, faster than my Mustang.
I'm sure the battery's just.
Yeah, so I see that out there a lot, and we don't have any rules on it. People are allowed to do that.
So does the grant dictate how long we have to provide free charging services?
No, it does, it basically, like, if we want to provide charge, I think we can do it this way, but it's like technologically not like, they're not the kind of chargers where we can just turn them into, swipe a credit
So
card.
it really, it's an opportunity to voluntarily pay. There is no enforcement in it. There's a sign that says, here, you can go to pay
Yeah.
for your charge.
So we'll try that
Some
for the
people
next,
do.
we'll try that for the next 3 or 4 months as we're waiting. We're not gonna pull out the EV infrastructure until we have replacement that people can charge with. But we'll get a cost estimate, and then we'll put the signs up and see if that can somewhat cover or mostly cover the costs. And if it can't, I think my advice to council is gonna be that we pull those chargers. And maybe if we electrify the fleet in 5 or 6 years, we'll have those that we can install in the highway garage and use in the future as a level 2 charger, because overnight, those will be fine for charging even huge EV batteries. So we wouldn't, we'd be able to potentially reuse them, or we might have to give them back to the grantee. I think there is some stuff in that. I read that contract 6 months ago now. But feels like, we've got up to 8 of these newer ones with the pay-for model, like that should be the city's model. And, or it comes back that it's only $500 a year for electricity over there. I highly doubt that, but I think it's going to be at least 10 grand a year.
Wow.
I hope I'm proven wrong, but, so now you're looking at, the life cycle of that is 50.
It is a little cheaper because we do have it on the solar credits, but it's not gonna be a lot cheaper.
Yeah, and we could put those solar credits to.
I was just going to say.
Yeah, we'll have to right size as like kilowatt hours. That's why I really want to get to like, what are the kilowatt hours? It's 24 cents in general. Like, let's use that as the cost estimate. So that's on charge. I did look into, Steve, on the reduction in workforce with revision. It seems pretty, which is,
I didn't bring that up, but I did read about it, but I didn't bring it up.
no, I wanted to, sorry, somebody brought it up, maybe one of the.
Someone brought it, it was 40 people.
Yeah, I thought it was, but, it was about, I think it was 40 workers, and it seems really relative. We all saw the boom in solar, in some ways created by the state incentives, which puts so much of the ratepayer, which they clawed back. And, there seems to be with a new presidential administration, there seems to be a little bit of, that solar piece, some of these, it's going to be an interesting new landscape for renewable energy and grants and other things. I don't really know exactly how it's going to shake out. I've heard rumors about the IRA, some of this funding being clawed back, including for what we just got for EV chargers, so we'll see what happens, but.
But if I could speak on that layoff that Ray brought up, he had thought there was 30, and I had read 40, but I didn't.
I think it was 40,
get into it. And, I'm sorry?
It was 40.
Yeah, I had read 40, but that's none of our business, how they run their business. Everybody is getting better at doing what they do and trying to find ways to be more efficient. And
Yep.
because somebody finds a way to right-size their company is none of our business, is my opinion. It's if they were failing us in some way, if we already were a customer and they were failing us, maybe we could gripe a little bit, but I'm sorry if we went through this with Bangor Hydro. They've cut the size of that company, versus whatever they are today, Amera versus, and they sent a Razor Ray guy down here and whacked that size of that company down, and the light switch still works.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's any of our business.
And I recall he brought it up specifically on whether that reduction in staffing at Revision would impact their ability to install and service what we had. So it does go to your point, was his question, but
And that's why I looked it
we
up,
can
was
also move on.
just in some of these other,
Yeah.
we've seen this with wind farms, sometimes a company, comes forward, they do all these things, and they, so I looked into that, and it didn't seem like, it just seems like they're.
They're still the biggest renewable
Yeah.
energy company
Yeah.
in Maine.
Yeah.
Slightly smaller now, but there's other companies in Maine.
Last I knew, Maine-based too, which is important
Yeah.
for me. I know we.
Yeah, employee owned, it's a B Corp, so.
It's a good company. They expanded into New Hampshire, like they're,
Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't account for how many jobs they've added. They just said that they're gonna cut 40. Maybe they added 400 in the
Good point.
last 2
Yeah.
years,
It's something, they've been.
Yeah, right.
And Tim, if you need to take off, we can.
Yeah, I've got to go too.
That's all right.
too. So I won't, we don't have next week's meeting, so.
Correct.
happy Thanksgiving,
And no warrant
everyone.
next week.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving.
No, thank you. No,
Day after
no, thank you.
Thanksgiving.
And then I won't be here the following Friday because I will be out of state.
Okay.
So,
Have fun.
thanks.
Thanks, Tammy, thanks for everything you're doing.
I-
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
That's
Every
what I
day
get.
I'm gonna
I get
thank
paid
you.
good money for this.
You do, 50
okay?
cents an hour.
Oh, I'm down to 10.
So, you know.
Oh, so whoever wants to take notes of the next one. I haven't been doing the minutes just because I just don't have time.
It's online.
I know, you said it's all
It's-
online and
You
stuff
know, it's
now,
all
so-
available to us with a YouTube.
And Nancy, I'm trying to get you a copy of the agenda.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that.
There is some tech stuff too that you can, some widgets that you can actually just have the minutes created automatically.
Just,
Um,
while we're here, I've got to be in Augusta, Friday, December 6th, so
You won't be there for that one?
it would
Okay.
be, yeah, I can't, I gotta,
Okay. I'll make sure to maybe hand you memo materials too ahead of, we'll really focus on that one. I think it's important both for
but
the.
you, so you need 3, right? So,
Yeah, I
I'm just,
really only
I'm
need
just
2
the
and
And then me.
alternate, so, okay.
so.
Good.
The Knowlton Park, we're talking about some upgrades over there on the splash pad. It was mentioned a few times, and just the slipperiness of the concrete. So getting some options there to move forward. There is that Knowlton Park reserve account, so again, we have these reserve accounts. These things come up, we start funding them. And talking to Jim too, who wasn't really aware of these kind of facilities accounts. We have a $90,000 in facilities accounts for this building, for City Hall. For other things, he's looking towards next season, start redesigning his budget to be more, okay, I can pull down on the general operating expenses, knowing that, like, for incidentals, knowing that we have these accounts that are made for hitting these pieces. So, so we're looking towards that. And then there's also some playground expenses, about 11,000 on repairs to the playground, other things, which I think I'd like to use the jump playground, which was, a donor account specifically to anything playground, and I'm gonna try and kind of clear the decks on those sort of restricted funds that can only be used towards the playground equipment maintenance and repair and replacement. And let's clear the decks on that jump account, and then and then we should keep funding the Knowlton Reserve account, but then the Knowlton Reserve will be,
Right.
whether we want to use it for the playground, whether we want to use it for this, whether we want to use, it's just a little more broad on repairing Knowlton Park.
Yeah, that sounds great, definitely appropriate to use the playground account for the playground repairs. And
Yeah.
then-
And
Clean it up.
Join us in maintaining the playground.
right.
Yeah,
It's the new jump.
there you go.
I like that. Just maintain the playground. There's also some interesting things on like the lines for the splash pad. Like not all of them work. There was a freezing. So
Only one of the sensors works to, like, sometimes, or at least last time, like, one sensor would not make the water go to the other sensor, and it goes.
yeah. So I don't know. But we're so little conversations. Do we you'd have to dig up the whole concrete for that. We also don't reclaim the water that's used. It's like over 1 million gallons a year.
Wow.
And we don't pay wastewater, right? So that's 1 million gallons of unpaid for wastewater and the water itself. That kind of, so that's now, but that's a $300,000 project, very roughly, to dig up the concrete, put in like a reclaim system that could go to the sprinklers and other things. Might be good to do over time, but like, that would be part of the infrastructure planning. We should not let that keep going down, just keep throwing 1 million gallons. That's,
And to your point on that, it's another great example of, it may cost $300,000, but what is the cost of that $1 million? Even if the city isn't paying for it, there is a cost to it. And, well, the state level, we talk about dynamic fiscal notes. This is what it would cost, but what's the other side of it? And here, we really can consider that when we look at where should we be making investments, just look at all sides of it.
yeah, and maybe on your point, Stephen, some of the length of time, what you bond for something like that, that one you might get some, really, you could put that on a 20 potentially, right? Because it's a systems change that, splash pads are probably, that's one of the most used. I mean, I think Knowlton Park really, it'll be part of the infrastructure planning, but how do we think about that facility? It's just such a high-value public utility to families, like
We're there
use.
once a week,
Yeah.
yeah.
My question to the I always ask this question, and sometimes it doesn't make any sense, but when you talk about rehabbing something or digging it up, what is the offset cost of just building new? I'm not saying mothball that one, but if it's 300,000 to rehab that, and it's 450 to expand it and make a better project and drill a well instead of drawing from our water source or what have you.
Yeah, I think the three is more for like the reclaim system. So in some ways, but it's kind of tied together because you'd have to dig the whole thing out, build a reclaim system, so in some ways it's it's a big project, not just for that, but for the water usage out there. Maybe it could be reclaimed into the sprinkler systems. But to your point, Steve, yeah, we gotta, and that's why I even think about this. Okay, is it worth it to spend X thousands to do the new kind of less slippy, concrete change, or should we take this opportunity to, it's already got busted pipes that aren't working, sensors aren't working. It's extremely high use, but it's also wasting 1 million gallons a year.
Wasting, but.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Using.
Or, yeah.
Cleaning a lot of children.
Well, if it could be reclaimed, you could consider it waste. Because if it
Excellent
had to reclaim.
clarification.
Right, yes, right. It's not as being as efficient as if it could be.
Much more efficient.
But it's a great value to families.
Such a.
It is so, that park is a great value to
It's
families.
like my son's favorite place.
Yeah.
No, park.
I was thinking or does it make sense? Hey, it's still got a few that work. Could we add on to it?
Oh, yeah.
A new one next to it, and now we're double, there could be plenty of use for that. And Knowlton
I
kind
bet
of,
there's a committee that would love to input on that with you.
I bet. Last thing is the recon, the reconciliation. I don't know, Ashley, if you had any updates for that, but.
Oh, no, we're still just going along. We're almost there. I know when Nate gets back, he's in the Carolinas right now on vacation. So when he gets back on Monday, I think we're just gonna tie up some loose ends and move forward and do our recons, and then the audit will take over. So
Cool.
we're getting there. It's the finish line. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
And it's not a train.
It's not a train this year.
Yeah.
And then we'll have kind of where we're at a good time to go into budget season to start talking about infrastructure. We're going to do a 10% cut exercise from last year. Here's I don't think we're going to get to 10% down. I know we're not going to get to 10% down, but I want to see what it would look like so we can start making some decisions. We'll actually have actuals for the first time.
God, that's exciting.
Yeah. And so that's going to be, and not just like paper actuals, really gone through Ashley sent out an amazing memo to staff, department heads about coming in January or soon to really
Good.
drill into, hey, these are all your lines, let's go through line by line by line. Is this everything in the right place? We've got to just to make sure that's totally lock solid going in. Then we'll have the reconciled to know what our actual, undesignated fund balance is, which will probably be the first time in at least 4 years since that's been known. We kind of have a rough estimate of that post, when we close out the budget at the end of the year of $1.5 million or so, but we got a $800,000 reimbursement from DEP. We've had some FEMA reimbursements, so now we'll actually be able to say this is, and is that sufficient going forward. We're also, to your point, Steve, on just because we budgeted it doesn't mean you have to spend it. We're really trying to think of that piece too when Ashley's moving forks forward, and if you're able to save some money as a department head, and and there's not just a cut exercise or trying to save money. Don't just think of it as use it or lose it, because there's all kinds of things that we need, and if we can keep the budgets tight and move forward, some things could be encumbered for bigger projects. We could think about some debt service on bond, but frees us up going forward. I know the mill rate is. I'm just laser focused on that. So.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on your 10% exercise there. This may come as a shock to you, but you know, how frugal that I am with dollars and cents. And I love that idea, but I just want to throw something out that in my time here, it seems like we had a huge increase last year and a smaller increase this year. And if the last thing I would want to do is let's say you did find a way to do 10%. I wouldn't want to go off the cliff and then up the slope the next year and have a polite bill for 1 year and then another big increase. If we could focus on maybe 2% and not go crazy. I don't want to see such a cut that we have such a spike.
Yeah.
And if it could be a little level, and I know it's an exercise, but I would hate to see, I mean, we're there. We've got these 2 increases that have happened, and sure, if we could find 2% in every department and not face these big spike increases and have slow, moderate, level playing fields, I think everybody in the long run over 10 years would be happy.
Yeah, and I totally agree, Steve. I think that's one of the, from a customer's perspective, you just see this, you don't remember, oh yeah, I remember I had that really low tax rate for that 1 year because like the council was trying to be like, and then all of a sudden the next council is like, well, you'd hit me with all this deferred maintenance. And when I looked at the commit, which are really the only actual numbers that we had that were solid, all the spreadsheets, everything else was just, it was bad data in and you're gonna get, so I couldn't really, but the commit from Larry's numbers, that's the actual tax that went out and came back in. You see those like 2020, 2021, 2022, just tiny little increase, and it's just like, it was the highest inflationary years on record.
Yeah.
There was no way that collective bargaining increases alone, in the 600,000 range, and like there's no way that you could increase it only a couple $100,000 as a city budget from year to year. And I think, it's hard to, look back in time. I think they might have miscalculated TIF wrong and they were under budgeting by $1 million. And so, that's, and so then all of a sudden, the year before I came here, you have that huge 26% or whatever the increase it was, and then
17 and change.
17 and change, and then,
If we could have, just to, it's got to go up, let's face it. We've had the correction, like, to your point, we had a couple of flat years and then, and I had said that back then, that I brought my own tax bill in and said, over 10 years, it's gone up $50 a year. And, okay, maybe that was the wrong amount. Maybe it should have been $80 a year, not 50, and then all of a sudden craziness. So maybe it should have been $80 a year on a level keel to get where we're at.
And I know to Nancy's good work and smart growth, Ellsworth is in a very unique position that I do believe over a period of time that we can start reducing mill. Again, property value increases might not be a reduction in your actual taxes because your mill will increase. Or your mill will decrease, but if your property values exceeded that, you still might have a higher bill. But Ellsworth is on a good growth pattern. 5% property tax growth last year, 2% in new business and other growth. And there's a housing task force plan that I was in yesterday, and if we can keep doing things that promote growth here, and with a lot of the growth demands here on whether it's new water and sewer lines, new pieces to sort of get housing business growth in this area, that's already happening. 150 units, when those go online, that's going to be a lot of tax revenue growth. When the 40 units on Beals Avenue substitute goes online, more tax revenue growth. When the Witham Home to Suites, more tax revenue growth. The entire place.
And because of where they're built, the required services for them and the cost to the city will be lower than the tax revenue coming in. That's the piece of smart growth, is where we build it matters
Totally.
for quality of life and for the budget for the city. and
Totally.
state.
And I think that I'm excited. I think it's in a December meeting. I think in addition to the comp plan, so we'll have like all the foundational documents, but that's a big part of it. You keep it in your urban core. But that also might require some public investment to get some of that stuff out there. And the Meyer Street stuff, I'm dead. I've had 2 conversations with them since my tenure here. I'm going to maybe start having more towards next year. If we get a couple of those places, it's, that's, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year if it's a big enough enterprise. So that, yeah, we can,
I think I think Steve, we all see it the same way, because I agree with you 100%. Like, I want to see, just, consistency, and that has to do with how we're managing ourselves here, but also, if basically our increases in what we pay in property tax is more or less tied to inflation, and we're still providing these services, and we still have money to make public investments, that spur growth, that give us more, like,
Yeah.
there's
Bandwidth.
smart growth, and and I think a
Yeah.
lot of it has to do with, what we're doing here, but I think we're all, I agree with you completely about, I want to see just that, like,
Yeah.
yeah, and I don't think that, my sense is like the 10% cut exercise is just one piece in that, but it's also like the saying, right, like shoot for the moon, even if you miss, you land with the stars, it's
Yep.
like 10%, but if we're still able to provide all the services and it gets down to their budgets are cut by 5%, right, and then we're finding,
yeah.
other ways that.
And it kind of gives the work back for me a little bit. I did feel a little bit, came in kind of late, finally built the budget book, finally had like a document that I could see, and it's like, I'm going to cut everybody's office supplies and training budgets by 10%. Like, I'm just like, that wasn't a huge change in the mill rate, but that seemed to be where the flex was. But, the department heads themselves, like, what is the most effective way to minimize the least amount of pain that you could cut at 10%, and what would that look like? And like, oh, that's too much pain. We're gonna have to like fire two police officers. That's too much pain. We're growing. We can't do
In
that.
those conversations, Charlie, you mentioned it a little bit, but I think the importance of supporting the fact that this isn't use it or lose it, like there's a conversation about if you had money this year, whether or not you spend it, the investments need to be made this year. It doesn't need to be reflected in future years, but letting go of that use it or lose it, I'm going to lose my budget if I don't. And it's logical. It's a very tactical move to
Yeah.
use it so you don't lose it, but anything in your conversations with department heads about the downsides of that and how to avoid that,
Yeah, and
I think would be really helpful.
That's why I like municipal budgeting a lot better than the state budgeting, because we were in a total use it or lose it in the state, because you just never know what weird freeze would come.
Right.
You have to plan years in advance if you're trying to do any kind of initiative. But, at a municipal level, if something comes up and we feel like it's hugely valuable to the city, like, we can figure it out. Like, we're not gonna, like, come to me, we'll talk about it. You're not gonna be locked into it next year with the legislature, go there. But then there's the second piece, which is the public trust, which is, going through this, really trying to, establish for the public who's seen some bigger increases that, we've, and not being in a use it or lose it phase to, hey, like, my own budget, got a new car this year. Had some tough conversations, my wife and I, on just like, how do we afford it? Like, what's the pain in other ways? We don't want to cut back on how much we're saving for retirement or our kids' college. So like, those are non-negotiable. We're going to keep going there. We're not going to cut those for the new car. Well, so we got rid of our Amazon account. We're not going to make it easy for us to purchase things anymore. We're going to try and cut. So a lot of times we run out of all kinds of things. There's not, it's not just coming all the time, and it's not, oh yeah, I should buy that. I'm going to go on there, and that's saved an enormous amount of money. And to me, it was like, oh, like I thought that was a value of mine, but I reanalyzed our values and like what we could get better, get much. Not having to take a clunker to the, and spend $5,000 a year. That there's those things. There's also as the budget, all of our land. Larry, one of his SMART goals is going to be a full inventory of all our land assets. Some of them we own outright that were bought to build a road that ended up not getting built. So let's sell it. We own those outright. Let's sell it. Let's get back on the tax rolls. We'll get money for that, whatever
That's
the market
great.
is. We'll also potentially get taxes for it going forward. Some of those we've acquired through liens, and that's newly a very different process. But potentially, I think the idea is let's sell all that stuff too, and if the proceeds go back to the original lien holder or the person we liened against, that's fine, because we want those on the tax rolls. The city just, I feel like, should only own the things, stuff like Pump House Point, another depreciating asset. There's going to be a lot more of those types of, how do we tighten the belt and right size a lot of these assets that kind of, that book is.
Or if we do maintain ownership, how and in what way does it add value to the city instead of just sitting there? Pump house is an interesting idea about what
Yeah.
is the potential there?
Kind of-
So, I love it. I love it that they're gonna, Larry will be working on that next year.
Yeah, it's another binder that, it's 2018, 2019, all city-owned properties, it's beautifully tabbed, and,
Wow.
but it's, not accurate now. Or maybe it's the most accurate we have, but it just kind of sat there. There's even a reserve line item which has 0 in it on proceeds from land sales. So there's even a place to put the money if we sell the land. So that's, sometimes cities are kind of like the Smog from Lord of the Rings that just hoards their treasure. That just likes treasure for treasure's sake, so.
There you go.
Awesome.
That's fabulous.
Thanks all.
Yeah,
Cool.
thank you. Thank you.
Oh,
right.
Thanksgiving week.
Yes. Favorite holiday.